Eleanor Whitmore sat in the high-backed leather chair of her late father's study, her fingers tracing the edges of a ledger that held more secrets than the oak-paneled walls around her. At 68, she carried the grace of a woman who had weathered decades of love, loss, and quiet victories. Her silver hair, swept into a tidy bun, gleamed under the soft glow of the desk lamp. But her eyes, sharp, hazel, and unyielding, betrayed a storm brewing beneath her calm exterior. The ledger wasn't just numbers. It was power. It was her power, though her husband, Charles, had never suspected it. For 35 years, Eleanor had been the dutiful wife. She had hosted galas, smiled through Charles's endless business dinners, and raised their two daughters, Claire and Margaret, with a tenderness that balanced his cold ambition. Charles Whitmore, at 72, was a man of charisma and ruthlessness, a real estate magnate whose name adorned skyscrapers across Chicago. To the world, he was a titan. To Eleanor, he was a stranger who shared her bed but not her heart. The first hint of his betrayal came on a crisp October morning, 3 months ago, when Eleanor overheard a hushed phone call in the garden. Charles's voice, usually commanding, was soft, almost tender, as he murmured, "I'll make it work, darling. Don't worry." The word darling struck Eleanor like a shard of glass. She had followed him that day, her heart pounding, to a discreet cafe in Lincoln Park. There, she saw a hara woman half her age, radiant with youth and pregnancy, her hand resting on Charles's as they laughed over coffee. Eleanor didn't confront him. She didn't cry. Instead, she returned home, opened the ledger, and began to plan. The trust fund was her father's legacy, a fortune Charles believed he controlled as the family patriarch. But Eleanor's father, a shrewd banker, had ensured his daughter's independence. The trust, worth millions, was in her name alone, a fact Charles had never questioned. He assumed his lavish lifestyle yachts, private jets. The Mistress tucked away in a Gold Coast penthouse was funded by his own brilliance. Eleanor had let him believe it. Until now. Tonight, Charles was late again. He'd called to cancel their anniversary dinner, claiming a last-minute meeting in New York. Eleanor knew better. She'd seen the text on his phone, carelessly left on the kitchen counter. "I'm sorry, love. I have to cancel our weekend." She's suspicious. The she was Eleanor, and the love was the mistress, Vanessa, whose pregnancy was now 6 months along. Eleanor's lips tightened as she closed the ledger. She wasn't just a scorned wife. She was a woman with a plan. The study door creaked open, and Charles stepped in, his tailored suit slightly rumpled, his silver hair disheveled from the wind. "Eleanor, you're still up." His voice carried a trace of irritation, as if her presence was an inconvenience. "I couldn't sleep," she replied, her tone even. "I was reviewing the trust fund accounts." Charles's eyes flickered, but he waved a hand dismissively. "You don't need to bother with that. I've got it handled." "Do you?" Eleanor's voice was soft, but it carried a weight that made Charles pause. She rose from the chair, her silk robe rustling, and walked to the window overlooking their sprawling estate. "I've been thinking about our legacy, Charles, about what we've built, and what we stand to lose." He frowned, sensing something amiss but unable to pinpoint it. "What are you getting at?" Eleanor turned, her gaze piercing. "I know about Vanessa." The silence that followed was deafening. Charles's face paled, his usual confidence replaced by a flicker of fear. "Eleanor, I don't." She cut him off, her voice steady but laced with pain. "I've known for months. I know she's carrying your child. I know you've been funneling money to her. Money you thought came from your accounts. But you were wrong. Charles's jaw tightened. What are you talking about? The trust fund, Eleanor said, stepping closer. It's mine. Every cent. Father made sure of it. You've been spending my money, Charles. And now, I decide what happens next. His eyes widened, a mix of disbelief and panic. You're bluffing. Eleanor smiled. A small, dangerous smile. Am I? Call your banker tomorrow. Ask him who controls the Whitmore fortune. Then we'll talk about what happens to Vanessa. And to you? She turned back to the window, leaving Charles frozen in the doorway. The game had begun, and Eleanor was no longer the silent partner. She was the architect of his reckoning, and she would play her hand with precision. For now, she let him stew in his uncertainty, knowing the real battle was yet to come. The next morning, the Whitmore estate was cloaked in an uneasy quiet. Eleanor stood in the kitchen, brewing coffee with deliberate care, the aroma filling the air as sunlight streamed through the tall windows. She wore a tailored cream blouse and slacks, her appearance impeccable, as if armor against the chaos brewing within her. Charles had left at dawn, his face a mask of agitation, muttering about an urgent meeting. Eleanor knew he was calling his banker, desperate to confirm or deny her claim. She sipped her coffee, the porcelain cup warm against her palms, and waited. Her mind drifted to the early years of their marriage, when Charles's ambition had been a spark she admired. He'd been charming then, his promises of a grand future laced with sincerity. Eleanor had believed in him, in them. She'd poured her energy into their family, into the life they built together. But somewhere along the way, Charles had changed. Or perhaps he'd always been this man who craved control, who saw love as a transaction. Vanessa was just the latest proof. The phone rang, shattering her reverie. It was Claire, their eldest daughter, her voice bright but tinged with concern. Mom, are you okay? Dad sounded off when I called him. Eleanor hesitated. Claire, now 32 and a lawyer in Boston, had always been perceptive. Margaret, 2 years younger and a painter in San Francisco, was more intuitive. But Claire could read people like a courtroom witness. I'm fine, darling, Eleanor said, forcing warmth into her tone. Your father's just dealing with some business stress. Claire wasn't convinced. You'd tell me if something was wrong, right? Of course, Eleanor lied, her heart aching. She couldn't burden her daughters not yet. They deserved to know their father's betrayal, but only when she was ready to unveil the full scope of her plan. After hanging up, Eleanor moved to the garden, her sanctuary. The roses, meticulously tended, bloomed in defiant bursts of red and white. She knelt, pruning shears in hand, and thought of Vanessa. The young woman wasn't the villain here Charles was. Vanessa, with her wide-eyed hope and swollen belly, was a pawn in his game. Eleanor felt a pang of pity, but it was fleeting. Pity wouldn't undo the hurt, wouldn't restore the years she'd lost to a man who valued her only as a prop. Her phone buzzied a text from Charles. We need to talk. Tonight. Eleanor's lips curved into a faint smile. The banker had confirmed it. Then, Charles now knew the truth. The trust fund, the lifeblood of his empire, was hers to command. She didn't reply. Let him come to her. That evening, Charles returned, his face a storm of suppressed rage. He found Eleanor in the dining room, setting the table for a dinner she'd prepared herself, a rare act, given their staff. The gesture was deliberate, a reminder of the home she'd built, the life he'd taken for granted. Eleanor, he began, his voice low. Is it true? The trust fund. It's all in your name. She placed a napkin with precision, not meeting his eyes. It always has been. Father was clear. The money was mine to manage. You never asked. Charles. You assumed. His fists clenched. You let me believe. I let you believe what you wanted. She interrupted, her voice calm but cutting. You built your empire on my silence. But silence isn't surrender. Charles paced, his polished shoes clicking against the hardwood. What do you want? To ruin me. To take everything. Eleanor finally looked at him, her gaze steady. I want justice. For me. For our daughters. For the life you've betrayed. And for Vanessa. Who deserves better than being your secret? He flinched at Vanessa's name, a crack in his armor. She's nothing to do with this. She's pregnant. Eleanor finished. With your child. A child you thought you could hide. Like you hid your affairs before her. But I see everything now. Charles. He sank into a chair, defeated for the moment. What's your plan? Then. To cut me off. To leave me with nothing. Eleanor leaned forward, her voice soft but unyielding. My plan is to remind you who I am. Not just your wife, but the woman who holds your future in her hands. You'll see. Charles. You'll see. She stood, leaving him at the table, the weight of her words settling like dust. The battle was far from over, but Eleanor felt a spark of triumph. For the first time in years, she was in control not just of the money, but of her own story. The days that followed were a delicate dance of power. Charles, once the unassailable king of their household, moved through the estate like a man on borrowed time. His usual swagger was gone, replaced by a wary caution. Eleanor watched him closely, noting every glance, every hesitant word. She didn't gloat she wasn't that kind of woman, but she felt a quiet satisfaction in his unease. The ledger, now locked in a safe only she could access, was her sword, and she wielded it with precision. Eleanor spent her mornings in the study, reviewing the trust fund's investments. Her father had taught her the intricacies of finance, a skill she'd hidden behind the facade of a society wife. Now, she pored over stock portfolios, real estate holdings, and offshore accounts, ensuring every detail was airtight. Charles's empire was vast, but it was built on her foundation. She could dismantle it with a single call to her lawyer, but that wasn't her goal, not yet. Destruction was too easy. She wanted him to understand the cost of his choices. One afternoon, while sorting through documents, Eleanor found a letter tucked in an old file. It was from her father, written just before his death 20 years ago. My dearest Ellie, it began. Never let a man define your worth. The trust is your shield, your strength. Use it wisely. Tears pricked her eyes. She'd forgotten how fiercely her father had believed in her. The letter steeled her resolve. This wasn't just about Charles. It was about honoring the woman she'd always been. Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. It was Margaret, her youngest daughter, who had flown in unannounced from San Francisco. At 30, Margaret was a whirlwind of color and emotion, her auburn hair loose and her eyes searching. Mom, what's going on? Claire called me. She said Dad's acting strange. And you're different. Eleanor embraced her, inhaling the faint scent of paint that clung to Margaret's clothes. I'm fine, sweetheart. Just handling some family matters. Margaret pulled back, her artist's intuition cutting through Eleanor's calm. Don't lie to me, Mom. I can feel it. Something's wrong. Eleanor sighed, leading Margaret to the sofa. She couldn't keep the truth from her daughters forever, but she wasn't ready to share the full weight of Charles's betrayal. Instead, she said, "Your father and I are navigating some challenges. I promise I'll tell you everything soon." Margaret frowned but nodded, trusting her mother's strength. They spent the afternoon talking about Margaret's latest art show, a welcome distraction. But as evening fell, Eleanor's mind returned to her plan. She'd hired a private investigator to dig into Vanessa's life, not out of malice, but to understand the woman Charles had chosen over her. The report arrived that night, delivered in a plain manila envelope. Vanessa Harper, 29, was a former marketing assistant who'd met Charles at a charity gala. She lived in a luxury condo funded by Charles, her pregnancy confirmed by medical records. But what struck Eleanor was Vanessa's background, raised in foster care. She'd clawed her way through college, only to fall for Charles's promises. Eleanor saw herself in Vanessa's ambition, her hunger for a better life. It made her plan more complex. Hurting Vanessa would mean hurting another woman who'd been manipulated by Charles's charm. That night, Charles confronted her again, this time in their bedroom. "Eleanor, this has to stop," he said, his voice strained. "You can't hold the trust fund over me like this. We're married. We're a team." "A team?" Eleanor's laugh was bitter. "You stopped being my partner when you started lying. Tell me, Charles, did you think of our daughters when you planned a new family with her?" He flinched, his face reddening. "You don't understand. Vanessa's different. She needs me. And I didn't." Eleanor's voice cracked, betraying the pain she'd buried. "I gave you everything, Charles. My love, my trust, my silence. And you repaid me with betrayal." He reached for her, but she stepped back. "Don't touch me," she said, her voice low. "You have one chance to make this right. End things with Vanessa. Be the father our daughters deserve. Or I'll show you what it means to lose everything." Charles stared at her, his bravado crumbling. For the first time, Eleanor saw fear in his eyes, not just of losing his wealth, but of losing her. She turned away, her heart heavy but resolute. The storm was gathering, and she would be its center. Eleanor woke to the sound of rain pattering against the windows, a soft rhythm that mirrored the steady beat of her resolve. She'd given Charles an ultimatum, but she knew he wouldn't bend easily. His pride was as much a part of him as his ambition. Today, she would take the next step in her plan, not to destroy him, but to force him to confront the consequences of his choices. She dressed carefully, choosing a navy dress that exuded quiet authority. Her first meeting was with her lawyer, Abigail Stern, a sharp-witted woman who'd handled the Whitmore Trust for decades. Abigail's office in downtown Chicago was a stark contrast to the opulence of the Whitmore estate, functional, unadorned, a place where truth outweighed pretense. "Eleanor," Abigail said, her eyes warm but professional, "you're sure about this? Once you move the funds, there's no going back." Eleanor nodded, her hand steady as she signed the documents. "I'm sure. Transfer half the trust to accounts in Claire and Margaret's names. The rest stays under my control, but I want it liquid. I need options." Abigail raised an eyebrow. "This will gut Charles's liquidity. His deals, his lifestyle, it all collapses without the trust." "I know," Eleanor said, her voice firm. "He needs to understand what he's risking. Not just money, but our family." The transfer was executed by noon, a silent earthquake that would soon shake Charles's world. Eleanor felt a mix of relief and dread. She wasn't a vindictive woman, but justice required sacrifice. She thought of her daughters, of the life she wanted for them, a life free from their father's shadow. Back at the estate, Eleanor found a letter slipped under the study door. It was from Vanessa, written in neat, Careful handwriting. Mrs. Whitmore. It began. I know you must hate me. I didn't mean to hurt you. Charles told me you were separated, that your marriage was over. I believed him. I'm sorry. The letter went on to describe Vanessa's fear, her uncertainty about raising a child alone. She didn't ask for forgiveness, only understanding. Eleanor's heart twisted. Vanessa wasn't the enemy. She was a victim of Charles's lies, just as Eleanor had been. She tucked the letter away, her mind racing. Confronting Vanessa directly hadn't been part of her plan, but now it felt necessary. She needed to see the woman who'd unwittingly upended her life. Using the investigator's report, Eleanor drove to Vanessa's condo that afternoon. The building was sleek, modern, a monument to Charles's extravagance. Vanessa answered the door, her face pale, her pregnant belly prominent under a loose sweater. At 29, she was striking, with dark curls and eyes that held both fear and defiance. Mrs. Whitmore, Vanessa said, stepping back. I didn't expect you. I got your letter, Eleanor said, her voice gentle but firm. May I come in? Vanessa nodded, leading her to a minimalist living room. They sat, the silence heavy. Eleanor spoke first. Charles lied to you. We're not separated. He's been my husband for 35 years. But I'm not here to blame you. Vanessa's eyes filled with tears. I thought he loved me. He promised we'd have a life together, that he'd take care of us. Eleanor's chest tightened. He's good at promises. But I need you to know something. The money he's been giving you, the life he's built for you's mine. I control the trust fund, and I'm done letting him use it to hurt people. Vanessa's hands trembled. What does that mean for me? For my baby? I don't know yet, Eleanor admitted. But I'm not your enemy. Vanessa, I want to help you, if you'll let me. They talked for an hour, two women bound by the same man's betrayal. Vanessa shared her fears, her dreams for her unborn child. Eleanor listened, seeing echoes of her younger self. When she left, she promised to stay in touch. Vanessa wasn't her rival. She was a mirror, reflecting the cost of Charles's selfishness. That night, Charles stormed into the study, his face red with fury. You transferred half the trust. To the girls. Are you trying to ruin me? Eleanor stood, unflinching. I'm protecting them. And I'm giving you a choice. Charles. End things with Vanessa. Come clean to our daughters. Or lose everything. The clock's ticking. He stared at her, a man cornered. For the first time, Eleanor saw not just fear, but respect. She'd changed the game, and he knew it. The air in the Whitmore estate felt charged, as if the walls themselves held their breath. Eleanor had shifted the balance of power, and Charles was unraveling. He spent his days on the phone, barking at advisors, trying to salvage deals that were crumbling without the trust fund's backing. Eleanor watched from the sidelines, her heart a mix of resolve and sorrow. She didn't want to destroy him, not entirely, but he needed to feel the weight of his actions. Claire arrived from Boston the next day, her lawyer's instincts on high alert. She cornered Eleanor in the library, her voice low. Mom, what's happening? Dad's a mess. And you're different. Stronger, but different. Eleanor hesitated, then decided it was time. She sat Claire down and told her everything: Charles's affair, Vanessa's pregnancy, the trust fund. Claire's face hardened with each word, her hands gripping the armrests. How could he do this to you? To us? I've asked myself that 1,000 times, Eleanor said, her voice soft. But I'm not letting his choices define me anymore. I've protected you and Margaret, The trust is in your names now. Claire's eyes widened. You did that for us. For you. And for me. Eleanor said. I want you to have what I didn't control over your own future. Claire hugged her, tears in her eyes. I'm so sorry. Mom. What can I do? Just be here, Eleanor said. And when the time comes, help me tell Margaret. That evening, Eleanor met with Vanessa again, this time at a quiet park near the condo. Vanessa looked weary, her hands resting protectively on her belly. Charles called me, she said. He's furious. He thinks I told you about us. He's wrong, Eleanor said. I found out on my own. But I need to know. Vanessa, what do you want? For yourself. For your child. Vanessa's eyes searched Eleanor's, as if testing her sincerity. I want a life where my baby is safe, where I'm not someone's secret. Charles promised me that, but I see now he never meant it. Eleanor nodded, her mind racing. I can help you start over. A new place. A fresh beginning. But you have to let him go. Vanessa's lips trembled. I don't know if I can trust anyone after this. You can trust me, Eleanor said, her voice firm. Not because I'm kind, but because I know what it's like to be betrayed. They parted with an understanding, a fragile alliance born of shared pain. Eleanor drove home, her thoughts on the next move. She'd given Charles a chance to choose his family, but his silence told her he was still clinging to his pride. The confrontation came sooner than expected. Charles burst into the dining room as Eleanor set the table for dinner, his face a mask of desperation. You've gone too far, Eleanor. You're tearing everything apart, our family. My business. Everything. Your business. Eleanor's voice was icy. You built it on my money, Charles. And you tore our family apart when you chose her. He slammed his fist on the table, the crystal glasses rattling. You think you can control me? I'll fight you. I'll take you to court. Eleanor stepped closer, her eyes blazing. Try it. Every dollar you've spent, every deal you've made, it's all traceable to the trust. My trust. You have nothing without me. Charles's bravado faltered, his shoulders sagging. What do you want from me, Eleanor? To beg. I want you to be a man, she said. Tell Claire and Margaret the truth. End things with Vanessa properly. Or I'll do it for you, and you won't like the consequences. He stared at her, the fight draining from him. For a moment, Eleanor saw the man she'd marry, the one who'd promised to love her forever. But that man was gone, replaced by a stranger who'd gambled their life together and lost. As Charles left the room, Eleanor sank into a chair, her hands trembling. The reckoning had begun, but it wasn't over. She was rewriting her story, and it would end on her terms. The weight of truth hung heavy in the Whitmore household. Eleanor knew the next step would be the hardest, telling Margaret. Claire had taken the news with a lawyer's restraint, but Margaret's artist soul would feel the betrayal like a wound. Eleanor dreaded the pain it would cause, but she couldn't shield her daughters any longer. They deserved to know who their father was. She called Margaret that morning, asking her to come home. Margaret arrived by evening, her paint-splattered jeans a stark contrast to the estate's polished elegance. Eleanor and Claire sat her down in the living room, the fire crackling softly in the background. Eleanor took a deep breath and began. Margaret, there's something you need to know about your father, she said, her voice steady but gentle. She recounted Charles's affair, Vanessa's pregnancy, and the trust fund's true ownership. Margaret listened, her eyes wide, her hands twisting in her lap. When Eleanor finished, Margaret's voice was barely a whisper. How could he do this? To you. To us. Claire reached for her sister's hand. He's not the man we thought he was. Margaret's tears fell, her voice breaking. I idolized him. I thought he was perfect. Eleanor knelt before her, taking her hands. No one's perfect. Sweetheart. Not your father. Not me. But I'm here, and I'll protect you both. Margaret hugged her, sobbing, and Eleanor felt her own tears threaten. She held her daughters, the three of them bound by love and pain. Charles's betrayal had fractured their family, but Eleanor vowed to rebuild it, stronger than before. The next day, Eleanor met with Abigail again to finalize her plans. She wanted to ensure Vanessa's future without enabling Charles's lies. Set up a trust for Vanessa's child. She told Abigail. Enough for education, healthcare, a stable life. But it's to be managed independently, out of Charles's reach. Abigail nodded, impressed. You're more generous than most would be. It's not generosity, Eleanor said. It's fairness. That child shouldn't pay for Charles's mistakes. Back home, Eleanor found Charles in the study, his face haggard. He'd aged a decade in a week, his confidence eroded by the reality of his powerlessness. I've been thinking, he said, his voice low. I'll end things with Vanessa. I'll tell her it's over. Eleanor studied him, searching for sincerity. And our daughters? Will you tell them the truth? He looked away, his jaw tight. I don't know if I can face them. Then I will, Eleanor said. But you owe them an apology. Charles, you owe them the man you promised to be. He nodded. A broken man. Eleanor felt no triumph, only a weary determination. She'd forced his hand, but the cost was a family forever changed. That night, Eleanor invited Vanessa to the estate. It was a risky move, but she wanted transparency. Vanessa arrived, nervous, her eyes darting to Charles, who stood silently in the corner. Eleanor spoke first. Vanessa, I've set up a trust for your child. It's yours, independent of Charles. You don't need him to survive. Vanessa's eyes filled with tears. Why are you doing this? After everything. Because you're not the one who broke my family, Eleanor said. He did. Charles's face crumpled, but he said nothing. Vanessa nodded. Her voice choked. Thank you, Mrs. Whitmore. I'll make sure my child knows your kindness. After Vanessa left, Charles turned to Eleanor. I'll do what you want. I'll confess to the girls. I'll end it. Eleanor met his gaze, her heart heavy but resolute. It's a start, Charles. But it's not enough. You've got a long way to go to earn back what you've lost. As he left the room, Eleanor sat by the fire, the ledger in her lap. The confession had been made, but the healing was just beginning. She was no longer just a wife or a mother, she was a woman reclaiming her power, one step at a time. The weeks that followed were a delicate rebuilding. Charles kept his word, confessing to Claire and Margaret in a tearful meeting that left the sisters shaken but united. He admitted his affair, his lies, and his shame, though his words felt rehearsed, as if he were performing remorse. Eleanor watched from the doorway, her heart torn between hope and skepticism. Could a man like Charles change? She wasn't sure, but she'd given him a chance to try. Claire and Margaret rallied around their mother, their anger at Charles tempered by their love for her. They spent evenings together, cooking, talking, laughing through the pain. Eleanor cherished these moments, a reminder of the family she'd fought for. But she wasn't naive. Charles's confession was a step, not a resolution. Trust, once shattered, wasn't easily rebuilt. Eleanor focused on Vanessa's future, working with Abigail to finalize the child's trust. She also set up a scholarship fund in her father's name, a way to honor his legacy and give back to the community. The act felt like a cleansing, a way to reclaim her identity beyond Charles's betrayal. She was Eleanor Whitmore, not just Mrs. Charles Whitmore. One afternoon, Vanessa called, her voice hesitant. "Mrs. Whitmore, I've decided to move to Seattle. I have family there, cousins who can help me raise the baby. I want a fresh start." Eleanor felt a weight lift. That's a brave choice. "Vanessa, if you need anything, you have my number." "I'll never forget what you've done," Vanessa said. "You gave me a chance when you didn't have to." After the call, Eleanor walked through the garden, the roses now fading with the season. She thought of her own fresh start. She'd spent decades in Charles's shadow, but now she was stepping into the light. She considered her options: divorce, separation, or a new kind of marriage, one where she held the reins. The trust fund gave her freedom, but it was her courage that defined her. Charles, meanwhile, was struggling. His business deals were faltering, his reputation bruised by whispers of financial trouble. He came to Eleanor one evening, his voice low. "I've ended things with Vanessa. She's gone. I'm trying. Eleanor. For you. For the girls." She studied him, searching for the man she'd once loved. "I see that," she said. "But trying isn't enough. You need to rebuild what you broke, not just with words, but with actions." He nodded, his eyes weary. "I know. I'll do whatever it takes." Eleanor wasn't sure she believed him, but she gave him a chance to prove it. She invited Claire and Margaret to help plan a family retreat, a weekend away to reconnect. They chose a cabin in Wisconsin, a place they'd visited when the girls were young. It wasn't a cure, but it was a step toward healing. As they prepared for the trip, Eleanor found a letter from Charles on her desk. "Eleanor," it read, "I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm asking for a chance to earn it. I've been a fool, but I want to be the man you married again. I love you." The words stirred something in her: hope, perhaps, or nostalgia, but she tucked the letter away. Love wasn't enough. Respect was. The retreat was a success, filled with laughter, tears, and honest conversations. Claire and Margaret confronted Charles, their anger raw but tempered by their mother's strength. Eleanor watched, proud of her daughters, proud of herself. She'd taken control, not just of the trust fund, but of her family's future. As they returned home, Eleanor felt a shift. The pain of Charles's betrayal lingered, but it no longer defined her. She was rebuilding not just her family, but herself. And she was doing it on her terms. A year had passed since Eleanor's world had cracked open, revealing the fault lines in her marriage. The Whitmore estate, once a monument to Charles's ambition, now felt like a home again, filled with the voices of her daughters and the quiet strength of her own resolve. Eleanor stood in the garden, pruning shears in hand, the roses blooming anew. She was 69 now, her silver hair a badge of her resilience, her hazel eyes brighter with purpose. Charles had changed, though not entirely. He'd stepped back from his business, delegating to trusted partners, and spent more time with Claire and Margaret. He attended therapy, a condition Eleanor had set, and slowly began to rebuild his relationship with his daughters. But the trust between him and Eleanor was a fragile thing, mended with effort but never whole. She hadn't forgiven him, not fully, but she'd chosen to stay. Not out of weakness, but because she believed in second chances. Vanessa had settled in Seattle, sending Eleanor occasional updates about her daughter, Lily, born healthy and loved. The trust Eleanor had set up ensured Lily's future, and Vanessa's gratitude was a quiet balm to Eleanor's wounds. She'd turned her pain into something meaningful, a legacy of compassion rather than vengeance. Eleanor's own legacy was growing. The scholarship fund in her father's name had helped dozens of students, and she'd taken a more active role in the trust's investments, steering them toward causes she believed in: education, women's empowerment, community rebuilding. She'd found her voice, not just as a wife or mother, but as a woman with power and purpose. One evening, as the sun set over the estate, Charles joined her in the garden. He looked older, humbler, his silver hair catching the golden light. "Eleanor," he said, his voice soft, "I know I'll never undo what I did, but I'm trying to be better. For you." She met his gaze, her heart a mix of memory and resolve. "I see that, Charles. But this isn't just about you anymore. It's about me, about the life I'm building." He nodded, a flicker of pride in his eyes. "You're stronger than I ever gave you credit for." Eleanor smiled, a small, knowing smile. "I always was." They stood in silence, the roses swaying in the breeze. Eleanor thought of her father, of his letter, of the trust he'd given her. She thought of her daughters, their strength a reflection of her own. And she thought of Vanessa and Lily, proof that even broken things could be made whole. As the stars began to appear, Eleanor felt a sense of peace. She'd faced betrayal, wielded her power, and emerged not just a survivor, but a creator of her own story. The trust fund was hers, but so was her future. She'd canceled Charles's plans, not with cruelty, but with justice. And in doing so, she'd reclaimed herself. The journey hadn't been easy, but it had been hers. And as she looked out over the garden, she knew she was ready for whatever came next: a new dawn, bright with possibility, shaped by her own hands.